One sent me my letter. Chaplain's waiting by the door.
All right. That's the fourth time I've seen this, and it's just as gripping as the first time that I've seen it. Obviously, I'm hoping everybody enjoyed it. We have a wonderful panel that's going to be up here for some Q&A. If anybody wants, again, just a reminder, there's some refreshments back there. If somebody wants a drink or whatever we have back there, just help yourselves. All right, I'm just going to just welcome our panel. We have Ben Jones from the Connecticut Network to Abolish the Death Penalty. Come on up, Ben Jones. The Executive Director. We also have Andrew Schnieder, who's the Executive Director of the Connecticut American Civil Liberties Union. Andrew. And last but not least, we have the very lovely Roberta Willis, Representative Roberta Willis. And we're going to have Davyne Verstandig, who is the chapter vice president, just sort of start off with a few questions, and after that, everybody just feel free to just chime right in. Yeah, sure. Let's do it. Yeah, if you want to grab that side. That works? All right.
Or is that still in your way?
A little bit more? There we go. All right. You're fine. Of course.
Oh yeah, this is there.
I think Vince mentioned in the beginning that Tony Gospel was going to join us tonight, and her sister died this morning. And I have Tony's book here. Some of you may be familiar with it, Choosing Mercy. She spoke at Wisdom House on Saturday on forgiveness. And she has spoken to my classes at the University of Connecticut a number of times. So I would just say on her behalf, she's against the death penalty, even though her son and daughter-in-law were murdered years ago in their beds in Montana. Shadow Clark was a young boy who murdered them, and every time he comes up for parole, she makes sure that he stays where he is. But she did not want it on her soul, I think she would say, to be part of, take part in his receiving the death penalty. So, any of you who aren't familiar with her book, A Mother of Murder Victims Pleads to End the Death Penalty, Choosing Mercy. And I would heartily recommend it. I'm sorry she couldn't be here, and for those of you who know her, she has, I think she turns 81 this month. She probably, 82. She probably suffered more than most of us with not only the death of her son and daughter-in-law, but a child who had committed suicide, one who was schizophrenic, but who has borne all this with great sense of forgiveness and certainly not naive in any way. Some of you may remember she was at one time the editor of the Litchfield County Times. So I just wanted to say that, and I'm sure you were all moved like Vince. I've seen this a number of times, but I think it's a very well-produced documentary. Governor Ryan is certainly an interesting gentleman, and the journalist students at Northwestern, who I think one of the people made the comment, what would have happened if they took chemistry instead of journalism that semester. Not said off the cuff either, but with great certainty. I just have a couple questions for people here, and then we can, or I think I'll start by saying, if each of you want to say your position on the death penalty before, or why you feel the way you do about the death penalty, before I ask some questions. So Ben, do you want to?
Sure. Well, I'm against the death penalty. And I actually grew up supporting the death penalty, and grew up in an evangelical home. It was just sort of assumed that, of course we're against the death penalty. And it wasn't until senior year of high school when a social studies teacher sort of went through, this is how the system actually works. And, we saw here wrongful convictions, the role that race plays, the role that poverty plays in executions. And I just could no longer accept the system. And I would, it wasn't an issue I got real passionate about, but then when I went to college, my friends started dragging individuals, and I started reading about these individual cases. And one that I think people are familiar with here is the case of Troy Davis down in Georgia. And this is a case where a black individual was convicted of killing an off-duty police officer. And at the time of the crime, there were 9 eyewitnesses who came out and said, this is the guy who did it, he's guilty. But there was no physical evidence connecting him to the crime. And what happened in the intervening years after he was sentenced is that many of these witnesses came forward and said, I didn't see him do it. I was coerced by police into making this testimony. And so what you ended up with, there were only 2 witnesses who never recanted. One of them is the person that a lot of people think actually committed the crime. And the other person originally said he didn't see who the shooter was. So, I learned about this case, and, any reasonable person would say, okay, I don't know if he's guilty, I don't know if he's innocent, but, there's not enough evidence here to go forward with this execution. And what was happening down in Georgia, they were pushing as hard as they could to execute this individual. And the only explanation I could come for why is that there were people who know they made mistakes during the trial, and they didn't want to admit that they were wrong. And to put someone's life ahead of someone's pride, I just couldn't accept. So that's sort of what got me really into it. And came out here for Connecticut for grad school, didn't like that too much, and ended up taking this job.
I'm Roberta Willis. I'm a state representative. I represent some towns in the northwest corner: Torrington, Goshen, Cornwall, Salisbury, and Sharon. I have always been against the death penalty, and have had 2 opportunities to take that vote in the legislature. The first time was very difficult. We weren't successful. We came really close. It was a nail biter. But it also was a time that Michael Ross was on death row. And Connecticut's a very small state. And there were a lot of legislators who lived in eastern Connecticut who lived on streets that the victims had died, or their families, knew their families. And that was a really tough political vote for them. I think one of them took the vote for abolition, but I think for the others, they just could not do it. I think personally, and also I think that the political repercussions would have been overwhelming. I wrote down a few things that came to mind for me and government and the death penalty. I think that I believe that it really speaks to who we are as a society, and that government should not be in the business of executing people or killing, that violence is wrong. I'm not a pacifist. I'm sure if I was in a situation where I was protecting my family, my children, I could kill somebody. I would do that to protect them. But that's not what we're talking about here. We've talked about mistakes not being able to be undone, the fairness issue of it for me. There is the cost. I don't really emphasize, but it is ironic that it costs a lot more. And for so many of my colleagues, it is more about politics than justice. It's a tough vote to take. And you really have to have the courage of your convictions to stand out there and take that. Particularly with Michael Ross. Particularly now, it's going to be really tough with the Pettit case. It is ugly. And just reading, trying to get through the reports on it and the photographs and everything, it is horrific. These people are, truly evil who committed this act. But all that taken into consideration, that's not what government should do. That's not the message that we should be giving. Maybe in the question and answer, I'll talk a little bit about how we passed it and how the governor vetoed it and some of my reactions to that veto message. But it was a heartbreaker because we felt like we came so close, and we didn't know until the very, very last minutes what she was going to do.
Okay. I also personally oppose the death penalty, as does my organization, the ACLU. And the ACLU's position is that the death penalty is the ultimate denial of civil liberties. You can't infringe on civil liberties more than by taking away someone's life. And we believe that the 8th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. It prohibits cruel and unusual punishment, and hence it prohibits punishment such as the death penalty. And the thing about Connecticut is it's the only state in New England that has put someone to death within the last 5 years. And it tends to be a fairly progressive state in many ways. But this is one sort of aberration in this particular issue of justice where it has, in my view, fallen into the wrong category. And I think we have a real opportunity here in Connecticut, especially come next legislative session. As Roberta mentioned, we came awfully close to pushing through an abolition, actually getting an abolition bill signed by the governor. Governor Ralph vetoed it. But next year we're going to have a new governor. So it's a new opportunity and a very promising one, I believe, assuming the right people get elected. And that's going to be incumbent upon you to make sure that the people running for office are supportive of abolition. And there's some promising signs out there. Even though the Quinnipiac University poll during the whole campaign to abolish the death penalty indicated that still a majority of people in Connecticut support it, there were signs of that poll that indicated there could be movement in another direction. 25% of the people who supported keeping the death penalty also erroneously believe that it costs less than keeping people in prison for life without parole. And another 15% erroneously believed that the death penalty is a deterrent. So if you take those two statistics with the support that the death penalty garners here in Connecticut, you can see that if we adequately and effectively educate the public about the true costs and about the issue of deterrence, we might actually move people a little farther away from supporting this type of barbaric punishment and a little closer to a true sense of justice. And so we have a real opportunity here in Connecticut to be part of a